one thing that can be really exhausting about the US, and it's not as bad as it seems in the media and social media, right? Most Americans are still normal and they're just living their lives and whatever. But the political and socio-cultural climate is a lot hotter there. There is more polarization. There is more division. It does feel a bit more unpredictable, and people are at each other's throats because of left and right, or black versus white, or red versus blue, or whatever it is. There are still, those fault lines are very present, and they're constantly being exploited and widened by a lot of bad actors. And I feel that when I'm in the nation, I do feel a bit of a cloud over me, where there's just that constant thing. And when it's hard to explain, but when I come somewhere like the UAE, it's just lifted. It switches off. Even if I go to the UK, it's greatly diminished, right? The UK political, social climate, it's not as aggressive. It's not as polarized. It exists, but it's not as aggressive as it is in the US with, the left versus the right and this, and everything is just so politicized. It's like a team sport, and that's just very ingrained in many people. So I like that as well. I like the fact that when I'm here, I just don't even, if I think about it at all, it's thinking about stuff that's happening back over in those countries.
Yeah.
Right. I like the fact that, cool, I can just think of all the other things I need to focus on, my business, my health, my finances, my family, thinking about moves I want to make in the future. Again, our brains can only focus on so many things at once. So if I'm being all clouded by all of this other stuff, oh, this happened in the school board meeting, and the GOP did this, and the Democrats are doing this, and we've got this election coming. Every election it's so exhausting.
You've been hijacked, haven't you?
Yeah, it's exhausting, and it never ends, because there's just these 2-4-year election cycles, and you can guarantee, this time next year, it's just going to be, remember how it was November 2016, November 2020, and they got the midterms, like it's going to be, whether it's Trump or it's Biden or it's this guy or it's that, and the way they frame every election as the most important one of all time, and this is an existential threat, and this person is, if the other girl or guy wins, then this is the end of our republic, and this is the end of democracy, and this person's a threat to democracy, and this, it's just so jacked up. It really hijacks people's limbic system. And I don't think people realize when this is happening. I think when you're in the mix, it feels normal. And then when you come out of it, and you look over and you're like, geez, man, that's a lot. That's a lot of anger. That's a lot of frustration. That's a lot of hostility. That's a lot of fighting. And I can dip my toe in it. And as I said, when I can add something helpful to contribute, I'm happy to. I speak at a lot of U.S. political events. I spoke at the Michigan Republican Conference a couple months ago. I speak at, the National Conservative conferences. I've spoken at the big libertarian conferences and so on. So it's not even that, I totally shy away from this, but you don't want to be like, I don't think it's healthy to be completely just in that water nonstop, day in, day out. And you can tell when people are, because you can just be having a normal conversation and they just keep mentioning the left and the right. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm not even talking about politics. And you just say something, you're like, yeah, well, that's the left for you. Oh, well, those Republicans. I'm like, dude, I'm not even talking about politics. And it's just in their language. It's in it's at the top of the mind all the time. Everybody they meet, everybody they see, they're trying to work out, are they a Democrat? Are they a Republican? Are they this? And I'm like, I'm just like, man, that's not a healthy worldview. Or it's the same, like you have the people who are like the race obsessed people, and everything, they just view it through the lens of race. And they imagine that everyone else does the same thing. That's part of why you have these activists who think that everyone is racist, because they're obsessed. They themselves are so obsessed with race that they think everyone else is equally obsessed, right? They think that the average white person in the UK or the USA is walking around with this racial lens every day and deciding how to treat people based on their skin color. It's like, that is not the reality. Most people
try to pay the heating bill.
Yeah. I tell most people who like really fret over, racism and so on, because I know people who do. And I'm like, bro, people aren't even thinking about you. People are not thinking about you. Like, people are pretty selfishly minded. Most people are, as they walk about, They're thinking about things that pertain to themselves and their own lives. They're not looking at each person they walk past and doing some deep analysis of who they are and their ethnicity and this and this. Like, I'm sure those people do exist, but they're few and far between. And even if they do exist, if they're not bothering you, what's going on in their head shouldn't matter to you, right? If I walked past a man in the street in London and he were truly a racist person who didn't like black people, do you know what? As long as he doesn't mistreat me or say something nasty to me, I don't care what's in his head.
It's not your problem, is it?
It's not my problem. Like, I'm not here trying to thought police people. So it's like someone might be like, oh, well, there's people who think like this. And I'm like, well, number one, you can't prove it, right? Unless they're out there like saying nasty stuff and doing nasty stuff, you can't prove it, right? You're psychologically mapping that onto someone else. And even if so, even if they do have horrible thoughts or they do have some things that are not quite, as long as they're not acting on it and encouraging people to do bad stuff, who cares? This might be a controversial opinion, but I firmly believe people are entitled to their own bigotry, right? Keep it in your head. You see what I mean? Like, yeah. Keep it in your head, right? Someone might walk past and, oh, actually, they think a thought that's not a very good thought. But we all do this sometimes, right? When you're angry or when something frustrates you or something, we've all had times where we think something that is not a good thought. It's a sinful thought. It's not something we should do or act on. And we don't. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, we might want to formulate our lives so that we think less of those thoughts. But again, this comes back to controlling yourself, right? Imagine me trying to take on the burden of thought policing all the 8 billion people in the world and making sure that they have the right, making sure they have the right ideas. That's why social justice warriors are going crazy all the time, because they want to do this to people, right? It's not even enough that you behave correctly. You must think the way they want you to think, right? So that's why they go around, they're calling everyone, this a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, a transphobe. But like they're just throwing all these labels on people, and they might not even be able to point out what they said that justifies those labels. They're just like, oh, well, he voted for Trump, therefore, or he voted for Brexit, so he's all these awful things. I'm like, well, can you prove to me that this guy's racist? Like, what did he do? And they're like, oh, well, he voted for Brexit. You're just like, what? I'm like, bro, that's your bad. Like, you need to work on yourself. Stop trying to work on others. Like, you sort out your own thinking, because you're not even making sense.